Hey guys, what's up? I'm doing an Amorphage deck profile this time around, and I've been playing this a lot in Plat 1 just for funsies, and I've actually gotten a couple of decent wins with it that I'm going to show you after this, and actually did pretty decently against Drytron with this deck as well. It's definitely not a competitive, like super competitive deck, it is more of a rogue deck, but this was a lot of fun, and I think I'll play this just to goof around sometimes. So we have one Dragon Pulse Magician, one Dragon Pit Magician, one scale 1, the other scale 8. They can both be searched with Pendulum Call. And Dragon Pulse Magician's Pendulum effect is if you have another Magician in your other Pendulum card zone, you can discard a Pendulum monster, target one face-up monster on the field and destroy it. And Pit does the same thing, but for spells and traps, so it's decent spot removal. 2 Maxi. I'm sure you're all very familiar with Maxi, but just in case you aren't, if your opponent's going to special summon a monster, you can discard it from your hand. Every time your opponent would special summon a monster, you get to draw one card. So, next up we have Amorphage Gluttony. All the Amorphages have the effect of if this card is pendulum summoned or flip face up, neither player can special summon monsters from their extra deck while this card is face up on the field, except Amorphage monsters. So all the Amorphage cards have that effect, and the ones that you would typically have to tribute for or pendulum summon out, they don't even have to be pendulum summoned. You can just tribute them and they'll have their effect. But all the ones that are like under level 5, they all have to be pendulum summoned out or flip face up for their effect to activate. Now for the fun part, their pendulum effects. So Amorphage Gluttony is while you control an Amorphage monster, monsters cannot activate their effects except Amorphage monsters. Once per turn during your standby phase, tribute one monster or destroy this card. I'm fine with the card being destroyed some of the time. Like if I see my opponent is not using, for instance, my opponent's not using trap cards, I'll just let the scale pop so I can put something down that's more useful or not lose a resource. Or maybe I want like a 1 scale instead of a 3 scale. But that's just me. So Gluttony stops all effects except for Amorphage effects. Lechery stops all effects except for all spell effects except for Amorphage spell effects. So it's really great because neither player can even attempt to activate a spell card unless it has Amorphage in the name. That goes for you too, but sometimes this is just a real good hard lockout against your opponent once you establish that as a scale and one of the Amorphages on board to lock them out of the extra deck. One Timebreaker Magician. I loved this card. This was actually so amazing. When this card is pendulum summoned from your hand, and no other cards are pendulum summoned at the same time, you can make this card's attack become double its original attack. So 2800 beater, which is pretty good. Once per turn, you can target one monster on the field, banish both it and this card from your field until next standby phase. Love the spot removal. And then each turn, the first pendulum summoned monster or monsters you control that would be destroyed by an opponent's card effect is not destroyed. So if you pendulum summon out one of your Amorphages with him, and you lock them down with, I'm just going to say, you have Goliath over there, who's just Macrocosmos essentially. You basically just have a game there, and you can say, well, that's it. But continuing on, we have 2 Ash Blossom and Joyous Springs. You can discard it from your hand to stop your opponent from adding a card from their deck to the hand, special summoning from the deck, or sending a card from the deck to the graveyard. You can only use its effect once per turn. I'm running 2 of them because 3 was bricky. 2 Performapal Skull Crobat Jokers. This card lets you search a Performapal Magician Pendulum monster or Odd Eyes monster. So it's just in there to quickly fetch us Odd Eyes in case we need to fetch something else. I might actually switch these out for something else. But we'll see. I have 1 Amorphage Greed. He stops trap cards unless they're Amorphage cards. 1 Amorphage Wrath. He stops the tributing of monsters. Like your opponent can't tribute for a summon, can't tribute for cost. They just can't tribute unless it's an Amorphage monster. One Harmonizing Magician. Cannot be special summoned from the extra deck. Cannot be used as material for Fusion, Synchro, or XYZ summon unless all the other materials are Pendulum monsters. When this card is Pendulum summoned from the hand, you can special summon one Magician Pendulum monster from your deck in defense position, except Harmonizing Magician, but negate its effects and banish it when it leaves the field. You can only use this effect for Harmonizing Magician once per turn. I think I actually might take out a Skull Crobat for another Harmonizing. And I would advise that y'all do that too. Because this card has just been MVP, and it lets you turbo out Dragon Pulse Magician from the deck. So I really did like that. Because I could constantly go into Enlightenment Paladin as a synchro, and he lets you add one of your spells from graveyard to hand. So it's really nice. If I need to Regeki twice, I can do it. If I need to use Pendulum Call again, I can do it, although I don't really see why you would, but because you already have 3 copies, but if I wanted to, I could. One Black Fang Magician. If he's destroyed by battle or card effect, you can target one Dark Spellcaster monster in your graveyard. That includes Enlightenment Paladin, by the way. And you get to special summon it. Pendulum effect, you can target a face-up monster you control. Its attack becomes face-up monster your opponent controls. Its attack becomes half its current attack. Then destroy this card. So you can lower an opponent's card by half their attack. Then send him to the grave and get Enlightenment Paladin. Amorphage Sloth. This is essentially Thunder King. Neither player can add cards to their hand except by drawing them. So, also really good. One Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon. I like it because I can search an Amorphage scale at the end phase easily, and because it's a beat stick, and because it's just been useful in general. One Astrograph Sorcerer. If a card or cards you control or destroy by battle or card effect, you can special summon this card from your hand. Choose one monster in the graveyard, extra deck, or it's banished, and that was destroyed this turn, and add one monster with the same name from your deck to your hand. The last part of the effect is if you're running a Zark, and we're not, so that doesn't matter. One Amorphage Goliath. This one is Macrocosmos. Basically, any cards sent to the graveyard are banished instead, except Amorphage cards. So if your opponent needs the graveyard for something, this will hurt their deck a lot. One Amorphactor Pain. I actually like running this one card, and I actually played it more than I thought I would. You can ignore the first part of the effect that Ritual summons with the field spell, because we're using Odd Eyes Advent instead, because it's searchable with Skull Crobat Joker, and also with Sky Iris. But Amorphactor Pain, if this card is Ritual summoned, your opponent skips their next main phase 1. I love that effect. Being able to make my opponent essentially go into battle phase is pretty nice. They don't get any more setup that way until the end of their turn when they can't attack. And it also negates the effects of all face-up Fusion, Synchro, and XYZ monsters while they're on the field. If it's sent from the field to the graveyard, you can add a Draco Overlord monster from your deck to your hand, except Amorphactor Pain, the Draco Overlord. One Regeki, one Harpy's Feather Duster, 3 Pendulum Call. It lets you discard a card, add 2 Pendulum Magicians from your deck to your hand with different names, and until the end of your opponent's next turn after this card resolves, Magician cards in your Pendulum zones cannot be destroyed by card effects, including your own. You can only activate 1 Pendulum Call per turn. You cannot activate this card if you activated a Magician monster's Pendulum effect this turn. So this card is great. Gets you your 1 scale and 8 scale, or your 2 scale, or your other 8 scale, or your other 8 scale. This card is just really useful, and even though I can't use 3, I'm running 3 for consistency, so I see it. 1 Duelist Alliance. If there's a card in your Pendulum zone, add 1 Pendulum monster, or Pendulum spell trap card from your deck to your hand. You only use 1 Duelist Alliance per turn, so that card is useful because it can add this, or it can have this. So we'll go into Time Pendulum Graph in a moment. 3 Pot of Extravagance. I wouldn't activate more than one, personally. If you do really, like, I wouldn't banish more than a total of 6 cards. Like, you could activate 2, I guess, but I wouldn't banish more than a total of 6 cards. This is just to get you consistency. You do need your extra deck. The only reason I'm running 3 is because that way I see it if I need it. I have bricked it once and I still won the game. 1 Sky Iris. Your opponent cannot target Perform Pal, Magician, or Odd Eyes cards in your Pendulum Zones with card effects. You can target one other face-up card you control, destroy it, and if you do, add 1 Odd Eyes card from your deck to your hand. You can only use the effect of Sky Iris once per turn. This is decent, and it lets you search out Odd Eyes Advent or Odd Eyes itself, and it protects your scales as well, which makes this card pretty decent. Actually, does it work for that? No, ignore that last part. 2 Odd Eyes Advent can be used as a ritual summon any dragon ritual monster, which is our ritual. From your hand or graveyard, you must tribute pendulum monsters whose hand or field levels total or exceed the ritual monster levels. If your opponent controls 2 or more monsters and you have no monsters, you can also send Odd Eyes monsters from your extra deck to the graveyard, which is awesome. 1 Solemn Judgment, 1 Solemn Warning, 2 Solemn Strike, 2 Time Pendugraph. Your opponent cannot target spellcaster type monsters you control with cards or effects, with trap cards or effects. You can only use the following effect of Time Pendulum Graph once per turn. You can target 1 Magician Pendulum card in your monster zone or pendulum zone, and 1 card your opponent controls, destroy them. Then if this effect did not destroy 2 cards, you can send 1 card on the field to the grave. So you can target one of your indestructible magicians if you used Pendulum Call the turn before. One of your opponent's cards, destroy 1 card, and then send another card to the graveyard because you didn't destroy 2 cards. So really love that effect. Once per turn, yeah, we already went over that. Okay, that means we are into the extra deck. So 1 Enlightenment Paladin, as I said before, if it's synchro summoned using a Magician Pendulum monster as material, which you can only use with Harmonizing, you can target 1 spell card in graveyard, add it to your hand. You can only use this effect once per turn. When it destroys the opponent's monster by battle, inflict damage to your opponent equal to half that monster's original attack. Decent card. 1 Number 80. The only thing you really need to know about this is you can detach a material from it and banish card in your opponent's graveyard. You can use it up to twice per turn. That effect's been really useful sometimes. 2 Time Star Magician. It's 2 level 4 Magician Pendulum monsters, must first be special summoned with the above XYZ materials. Once per turn, you can detach 1 XYZ material from this card, add it to your hand, 1 Dark Spellcaster type monster from your deck, graveyard, or extra deck. Once per turn, if a pendulum card in your monster or pendulum zone would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can send 1 spellcaster type monster from your deck to the graveyard instead. 1 Baguska. Once per turn during your standby phase, detach 1 material from this card. If you cannot, destroy it. This attack position card cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. Your opponent cannot target this attack position card with card effects. While this card is in face-up defense position, change all face-up monsters on the field to defense position and negate the activated effects of monsters that were in defense position when this was activated. 1 Number 60. You only use this effect once per turn, and you can detach both materials and use it to draw 2 cards, then discard 1, but skip your next draw phase, or skip your next main phase and special summon 1 monster from your graveyard in defense, or skip your next battle phase and double the attack 1 monster you control until the end of the turn. Gravity Controller. 1 non-link monster in extra monster zone. Cannot be used as link material when link summoned. This card in the extra monster zone cannot be destroyed by a battle with a monster in the main monster zone. At the start of the damage step, if it battles an opponent's monster in the extra zone, you can return both that opponent's monster and this card to the deck. ridiculously long effect, but doesn't target and it's useful. One misses Radiant because it's Earth, easy to make, has the good pointing arrows, and makes our Amorphages stronger. One Nightmare Cerberus. Destroy, when it's link summoned, you can discard a card, target a special summoned monster in your opponent's main monster zone and destroy it. If it was co-linked when you activated the effect, you get to draw a card. Phoenix is the same thing, except for spell and traps. Unicorn is the same thing, except instead of destroying a card, you can send any card on the field back to the deck. Borolo Dragon, neither player can target with card effects. Once per turn, you can target one face-up monster on the field. It loses 500 attack and defense. Your opponent can't activate cards or effects in response to this effect's activation. And at the start of the damage step, if it attacks a monster, you can control that monster, put it in the zone that this card points to, and send it to the graveyard during the end phase of the next turn. And then we have Appaloosa, which is 2 or more monsters with different names. Essentially, it gets 800 attack for every monster you put into it. So typically people use like 4, so it comes out with 2400. And every time your opponent would activate a monster effect, you can make it lose 800 attack and negate the activation. And that is it for the deck profile. I'm going to go ahead and leave you guys with the replays, and I will see y'all in the next one. Bye-bye.